Welcome everyone. My name is Charlene Margot and I'm founder of the Parent Education Series and co-founder of our new nonprofit, the Parent Venture. We could not be more delighted to be here tonight with some of the staff from Challenge Success, an initiative of the Stanford Graduate School of Education. I have been a great fan of Challenge Success before it was Challenge Success, back when it was the Stressed Out Student Project founded by Dr. Denise Pope and Madeline Levine from Stanford. Again, I love this organization from the beginning. I am a board member and a former board chair of the organization, so I believe in it wholeheartedly. We could not be more delighted to talk tonight about a healthy approach to college admissions. As you know, if you've got somebody in your house who's thinking about college, it's top of your mind. And I really think that tonight is going to do a lot to bring the charge down and help you feel more relaxed and less stressed about the college process. So let me tell you a little bit about how tonight is going to work before I introduce our panelists to you, okay? So again, the title of tonight's presentation is A Healthy Approach to College Admissions. This is a timely topic, as I mentioned, and with more than 320 people registered tonight, we know that it's important to you, parents, educators, clinicians, and maybe even some students who may be online with us tonight. Special thanks to our presenters, Margot Dunlap, Douglas Soy, and Sarah Miles. Sarah's going to stay in the background with us as the research associate, but Margaret and Douglas will be with you tonight for the presentation. A special thank you to the Sequoia Union High School District and Assistant Superintendent Bonnie Hanson, who sponsored today's event. As always, we are grateful for the Sequoia Union High School District and the Parent Venture for their sponsorship, without whose support this program would not be possible. So we're going to begin tonight with about 45 minutes of content, and that'll be followed by a Q&A where we hope that you, the audience, will submit questions. My partner, Bev Hartman, and Sarah will be in the background in the chat posting links. So please do check that out. Please feel free to talk to one another or ask us things in the chat, but we ask that you put your questions in the Q&A box. Later on, I will rejoin you to ask those questions of our panelists. So again, questions in the Q&A box, comments and links in the chat. We hope that you will keep your questions short so that we can get to as many of them as possible. And if you can, try to keep them fairly general so that they apply to as many families as possible. So also, if you need Spanish interpretation tonight, we have with us Cynthia Hinestrosa, who will be providing Spanish interpretation. If you run your finger along the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see a globe icon. And if you click on Spanish, you will get Spanish interpretation. If you need English, you can click on the English globe. Okay, so welcome and thank you, Cynthia. For Spanish, if you need it, click on the globe and then the Spanish globe. All right, and also there will be a very short survey. We'll put that link into the chat at the end of the presentation. Just takes a couple minutes. I promise we read them all. It really helps us plan for future parent education programming and also helps with our sponsorship. So thank you in advance. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to tell you a little bit about tonight's presenters. Margaret Dunlap, MA, is the Senior School Program Director at Challenge Success. She has over 30 years of experience in education leadership and program management with public and independent schools, serving as a teacher, trainer, coach, and leadership specialist. She is a graduate of Northwestern University and lives in the Bay Area with her husband and son, who is currently a high school senior going through the college admissions process. So this is a near and dear subject to Margaret's heart tonight. Douglas Soy, JD, brings over 15 years of experience in curriculum development, classroom engagement, and online learning through his varied career path as a lawyer, school teacher, climate change educator, and founder of a school for adult learners. He is a graduate of UC Davis and NYU School of Law. Sarah Miles, MSW, PhD, is the Director of Research and Programs for Challenge Success. She earned a master's in social work from the University of Pennsylvania and a PhD in child and adolescent development from Stanford's Graduate School of Education. Prior to joining Challenge Success, she worked as a teaching and research assistant at Stanford, taught bilingual fifth grade in Oakland, and worked as a clinical social worker in the Boston area. Please join me in a really warm welcome for our presenters tonight, Margaret and Douglas, and thank you, Sarah. Take it away, you guys.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. We're thrilled that you could all be here. Want to make sure everyone can see our screen. It really is a pleasure. I want to thank Charlene Margot for all the fantastic parent programming that she provides to everyone throughout the years. So we're, again, thrilled to be here. We're here to talk about a healthy approach to college admissions, what matters, what doesn't, and what to do about it. So let's get started. Just as a reminder, if you have chat, to please select all panelists and attendees. And if you have Q&A, to please type those in the Q&A button, and we'll address those at the end of the talk. All right, so let's look at this cartoon. I don't know how many of you, as a bedtime story, read this, the U.S. News and World Report Guide to America's Top 500 Colleges, Chapter 1. This is not what we're going to be talking about tonight. This is not what you should be doing. What we do want to focus on is the research and our white paper, which took us over a year to write, with some giant literature reviews that really underscores what matters. And it turns out it's about fit and engagement. So let's get started with one of our signature questions to really lay the foundation and your values in terms of thinking about college admissions in the process. So this is a time to warm up the chat. We'd love for you to reflect on this question. What is success? How do you define success, thinking about your own children? And what are the life outcomes you most value? So be thinking about what are the characteristics of success. And please go ahead and add those to the chat button right now. And Douglas is going to chime in. What are those values? What are those characteristics of success?
And if you would, change your setting to all panelists and attendees. We're getting some responses to just the panelists, but to have a conversation, change your setting to all panelists and attendees. Right now, we're getting answers to the panelists about hard work, perseverance, happiness, doing what you love, which are typical answers that we get, Margaret.
Yeah. So I see happiness, I see intrinsic measures, right? So we find there's a real disconnect. When we talk to parents, we typically hear these intrinsic measures of what you value the most for your child: well-being, kindness, relationship, connection, and belonging. The problem here is the disconnect, that what we say our communities value are very different. And typically when we ask students this very same question, we hear answers like this: money, high grades, prestigious colleges, all tied to these very extrinsic measures. So this is a problem which really fuels this pressure in terms of looking at college and college admissions. Now, I want us to step back and think about what are your worries when you consider the college admissions process, when you consider your child going off to college. What are your worries? So here's the prompt, again, to fuel the chat. You're all doing a great job participating. What I most worry about in regards to college and the college admission process is. I want you to think about that as a parent. And students, if you are joining us tonight, I want you to reflect on this for yourself. What do you most worry about in regards to college and the college admission process?
Apparently the chat only comes to us panelists, so I'll just read a few of them out as they come in. Gloria says expensive, not getting to the right college, not right for him, rejection, acceptance, affordability, deadlines.
Yeah, these are all what we hear. We hear financial worries, the testing. Can I take the test? Am I traveling to Reno to take tests? We will get to that. Will they be able to get it alone in terms of the independent piece? Not being able to whittle down a really long list, not knowing if they have a major, what they're interested in studying, and finding the right fit. And here's something around mental well-being, right? After all of the isolation from COVID and the pandemic, these are real worries, and our students have more. So thank you for sharing, and we'll kind of share in the chat what we're hearing from all of you so you can get a sense. And lastly, from Elizabeth, yes, real pressure on students from themselves, also from their peers and from their community and parents. The good news, I just want to back up, is that we can alleviate some of these worries with tonight's talk. But I want to share with you kind of the extreme worry our students are feeling.
Yeah, so Challenge Success does a lot of quantitative and qualitative research at schools, and we get these responses all the time. Our grades are what make up our future. If you don't get good grades, you won't get into a good college. You won't get a good job, and you'll lead a miserable life. And these are the perceived stakes that our kids are facing right now. I just want you to think about this and let it sink in. Take a pause. This is what our kids truly believe is going to happen if they don't get good grades and don't get into a good college. They feel like their futures will be completely destroyed if they don't do well right now at age 16 and 17. And so we like to think about it this way. When we hear success stories in America, it's typically the sanitized version of what really happened. We think success looks like this arrow on the left. It's one success after another, like one good thing after another good thing and another good thing. But in reality, success looks like the arrow on the right. And when we give this talk to people, we, especially live, we ask people, did success look like the thing on the left or the thing on the right for you? And I'm curious if you put it in the chat. I just want to say it for myself. Say left or right. What has success looked like for you? The right or the left? Yeah, I'm seeing the comment. I haven't. Oh, I got my first left, but almost 80 to 90% of people say that their lives have looked like the thing on the right. But here's the secret. We construct a high school narrative and a high school experience that prepares kids for life on the left. We say that you have to succeed over and over and over again, and any deviation from perfection means a miserable future life. And that's just not fair.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure on our kids, performance pressure, really moving away from, the learning and focusing on the earning. Again, harkening back to those intrinsic measures. And I want you to notice our logo. We've flipped the word success up on its head, upside down and backwards to really challenge this very narrow notion of success. And that's really what challenge success is in service of with school communities, is to help schools reframe that, to help parents, especially tonight, given the research and the reality of what matters in college. So I want us to think about that as we move into the next part of this talk. And I want us to really look at and recognize what is driving the sense of pressure. Let's really kind of clear up some truths here, some myths. The first one is more people are going to college. This is true. We want a college educated society. You are more likely to get a better paying job with a college degree. So absolutely more people are going to college than they did maybe 20, 30 years ago. It is true that the Common Application makes it easier to apply to a lot of colleges. Back in our day, Douglas, we had a typewriter and we applied to maybe 2 colleges. Now kids with this fear, with this anxiety and uncertainty, fueled by this sense of scarcity, are applying to a lot more colleges. So there are about 10 million kids, right, who apply to multiple colleges every year. And I just want you to think about this. In 2005, 5% of the freshmen applied to 7 or more schools. In 2016, that number skyrocketed to 35% applying to 7 or more schools. And those numbers keep rising. So it is true, a lot more kids are applying to a lot more colleges. It's a lot easier with the push of a button on the Common Application, but again, fueled by this notion of scarcity. Yes, the rankings fuel perception here, and perception of and competition for top schools. We will discuss this. And then it is harder, and this is true. It is harder to get into some colleges, even if you meet all of their criteria. Even if you have done exceptionally well in school, you have done wonderful things in your high school career, you may apply to your dream school and still not get in. So that is okay, because there are a lot of different places that you can go. But it is true that the stakes are higher. And even if you have all those criteria, you may not get into your dream school. I want to point out that just because a school is harder to get into does not necessarily mean it is a better school. And we will discuss that in terms of the rankings as well. And yes, prices increase. I think one of the first in the chat was, what is your worry? Expense. College is expensive, and there's this worry about the cost benefit of college and about debt, especially when we think about the economic uncertainty more than ever right now. It's economic in terms of global opportunities, local opportunities for jobs, and is it worth paying all this money for college? And now just in general, we're faced with COVID, a pandemic, and this fear and this uncertainty in the horizon.
What else is going on here? One of the things we like to talk about at Challenge Success is this is a gigantic transition for us as parents and a gigantic transition for our kids. Just want to think about this. We remember when our kids were little infants, completely helpless to the world, and the promise that we made to dedicate our lives to protecting them. And now they're leaving. And that's just really bittersweet. And it's a huge transition for our child's development too. They're imagining for the first time in their lives, leaving home, the only home they've ever known, and making it out into the world. Imagine that for a second. So one of the great things we want to do here is think about this important developmental milestone as an opportunity for self-discovery, independence, and growth for our kids, and not let this get hijacked by fear and anxiety.
Yeah. And, you know, I want to acknowledge and have you do some real soul searching right now and have a quiet 30 seconds to think about to what extent are these statements true for you as a parent, as a family. If my child goes to a highly selective school, they have a better shot at a happy life. Where my child goes to college is a reflection of who I am as a parent and who we are as a family. It is worth it for my kid to sacrifice their well-being to get into a particular college. Our kids, they truly believe these are true. They believe it because they hear it either discreetly or indiscreetly from the adults in their lives and from their community and from their peers. So we want to debunk these, and we want to really set the stage in terms of having these ideas debunked with the reality and the research. So we're going to go ahead and get started with just a quick reflection on our white paper we mentioned. We'll put the link at the end of this talk. What matters and doesn't according to the research. We titled the white paper "A Fit Over Rankings: Why College Engagement Matters More Than Selectivity," because fit, it turns out, is much more important than the rankings. And it's a little bit of a double entendre because everyone is having a fit over the rankings. We were very excited about this title. So we're gonna go ahead and share some salient studies and our findings based on our giant lit review. But first, I want us all to do a little of our own reflection and take a stab at your own ranking. So listen carefully to the directions. You're going to be doing some clicking and some downloading. So you'll see on the right, there is a list of criteria that I want you to think about, not for you, but for your child. What is important for your child? And I want you to think, maybe you have a junior, maybe you have a senior like I do, and you're in the middle of this process. Maybe you have a middle schooler and you might not know quite yet, but do your best guess. And if you have a younger child and you're here in the audience, that's great. You're working upstream, so you're fueled with this information when your child gets into the later high school years. So what is important to your child? There is a list. Sarah is going to go ahead and add the tiny URL link to the chat that you can copy and throw it into your browser and open. There's a next step to download it. There is also a version in Spanish. So she's going to also add that to the chat and make sure that if you are looking for the Spanish version, you click on that second link. So you're going to download it, you're going to open it, and you're going to find that you have a clickable view. And here are the different categories and columns I want you to think about. Again, think about what is important to your child. So here are the three different categories. Not important on the left, nice to have, but not essential, and essential, that these are really important. So I want you to think about, I'm going to clarify a couple of these. A strong athletic program. This could mean that you have a D1, D2, D3 student athlete who's really interested in playing in competitive college sports. That would be important to your child. You may have a child who's really interested in going to a school with lots of spirit and a big football team. That would also indicate a strong athletic program would be of interest. I often hear this question about what is Greek life? Those are sororities and fraternities and kind of these social clubs. So look through the list. We're going to give you about 90 seconds. So it's going to be a pretty quick clip here to go ahead and complete your ranking sheet now.
I think the trick of this, Margaret, is what matters most to your child, right? Not to you.
Right, to your child, to your child.
Yeah.
We have to clarify that even when we're in live presentations. I'm often walking down the aisles reminding folks, but yes, to your child. Think about your child's perspective of these. And this is a really nice activity to have your kid complete. And if you're a student here this evening, think about what matters most to you. All right, just another 30 seconds. I know it's pretty quick, but due to time, you can go back and think about this list. Thank you, Samantha Selby, who's supporting the chat with the Spanish version. Okay. Now, I want to share with you finding number one in the research. I want you to take a look again at your list. And again, if you were not able to open it, just be reflecting on this. I want you to take and think about one popular ranking system, and there are many, and we are speaking to right now the US News and World Report. This is on the right, what are the highest in terms of rankings and what they put the most focus on. I'll read this for you. They're in bold: name recognition and brand, highly competitive admissions, alumni giving rate, size of endowment, and my high percentage of students with top ACT, SAT scores, and small class sizes. Most of you did not list these as important to your child. And yet this is what is heavily weighted in the US News and World Report. And I want to just quickly share the highest point grabbers. The first one is there's graduation rate. It's actually about 30%. And the problem here is that they are looking at 6 years, not 4 in terms of graduation. And along with a few other retention metrics, that makes up 30% of the US News and World Report. Another giant point grabber, which is at 20%, is name recognition and brand. And I want to let you know how they get that. They send out surveys to 500 college and university presidents and ask them to fill out a questionnaire about schools. And they send a similar survey with different questions to guidance and college counselors in high schools. They ask them to rank the schools. There is no way that a particular college president or a college guidance counselor would know of a particular change, a new program in a lesser known school. So most of this is arbitrary and very subjective based on reputation. So again, what you're looking for in terms of outcomes for your kids are not valued in terms of the US News and World Report. It's not a science, it's not close to a science. They're looking at easy to measure inputs. And so that's a problem. The next thing I want you to look at is this question of selectivity. So this is our second finding. Does this level of selectivity matter for long-term outcomes? And I want to define selectivity. A non-selective school is a community college, right? You're basically 18, you go and pay your money, and that would be considered a non-selective school. Selective schools can range from they accept less than 5% to they accept 80 to 85%. So there's a huge range. And so I want you to think again and do some wondering about these outcomes. Does it matter for learning? Does it matter for job satisfaction? Does it matter for well-being? And does it matter for income? These are the answers I'm previewing for you, and we're going to walk you through these right now.
And so one of the things we'll what we're going to walk over the research, but all of it is in the white paper in greater depth. So we'll send you a link to the white paper after this presentation so you can go over it. But we'll talk about these one by one here. The level of selectivity of the college, i.e. what passes for prestige of a college, does not lead to more learning. And that has been replicated decade after decade. There's only one thing that leads to more learning in college. And I don't think it's going to be a surprise. It's the amount of time that a student spends studying. So when you think about if your child wants to learn, think about the place where your child's going to actually study the most. Secondly, the question is job satisfaction. So does the level of selectivity of a college lead to more job satisfaction after college? And the answer is no. Again, decades of research show that no matter where you go to college, it doesn't have any effect on how you feel about your job afterwards. And lastly, we're going to talk about well-being. The research firm Gallup has, for at least 5 decades, been asking Americans about these 5 measures of well-being. And what they've been doing over all this time is seeing what of these 5 factors do all Americans have. And there's only 3% of Americans that have all 5 of these factors, and that's pretty high bar. But unfortunately, 29% of Americans do not feel like they have well-being in any of these 5 factors. What's really interesting is Gallup also tracks where they went to college. And again, decade after decade, there's been shown that the selectivity of your college or the prestige of your college has no effect on these elements of well-being. There's no correlation. To put it another way, or to think about it in another way, if you look at these things, these are all the things you mentioned in the very beginning of what success is. And what the research is showing, and you'll see in our white paper, is all these things that you think of as success are not connected to how prestigious or how highly ranked a school your kid will go to.
Yeah, so, when you think about it, I want to have us go back to the income, right? Because the research is clear. There are no difference in terms of selectivity when you think about well-being, job satisfaction, or learning, right? So let's go ahead and look at income, and it depends. We're going to return to this one, and I want to point out 3 salient studies to help you understand this a little bit better. It turns out that there is a difference that shows up in the research of a 2-year versus a 4-year. So if you go and get your AA, you stop at community college after 2 years, there is going to be a difference in the amount of money you can make in a job versus someone who attended a 4-year school. Now, we want to point out that a 2-year community college engagement is a really nice pathway to the UCs, to a 4-year college, right? So for many kids, this is a great start. And the UCs, they look at the transfers first from the community colleges. So again, a great opportunity for kids who want to start at community college and then maybe transfer later. Again, there is a difference in the amount of income if you stop at a 2-year. Now, this is a really interesting study done, and the question these guys were asking, these 2 economists, were, is it the kid or is it the college that makes a difference, right? So Kruger and Dale, again, 2 economists, they matched kids. They got a whole set of kids, right, who were from like demographics, learning profiles, GPAs, communities, etc., and studied the kids who applied to highly selective, say, Ivy League schools and were admitted and went. And another set of kids who applied to these highly selective schools were admitted and did not go. And the question really was if it was the college or the kid. And it turns out there was no difference. And the study kind of followed these 2 different sets of kids, 5, 10, 20, 25 years out, and there was no difference. It turns out it's the kid, it's not the college. So that's something to think about. There is one caveat, though, I want to point out. There was a slight income difference for those students who applied to those highly selective schools, were admitted and went. who were from first generation or traditionally underserved populations. There was a mild difference in terms of the income. Now, if it's about return on investment, it turns out there are rankings for those as well. And if you want the biggest bang for your buck, it turns out attending a maritime academy, pharmaceutical schools, or other pre-professional schools will give you your, again, biggest return on investment, your biggest bang for your buck. Turns out if you go to a maritime academy and you are out there running a port, you can make a lot of money. Those schools typically have very high admissions rates, 60 to 80%. And again, you can come out and go to those technical schools and make a lot of money if that's something your kid wants to do. So those are kind of the key takeaways from the income research.
And Margaret, I also want to just chime in here and say that if we're concerned about ROI, the financial aid package and the total cost of college for your kid makes a huge difference on return on investment. So for all those people who are paying attention to how much college costs, that's a huge factor in the return on investment in college. Absolutely.
Yeah. So this leads us to what matters, our finding number 3. If those other pieces don't matter in terms of selectivity, what does matter? And it turns out engagement, right? It matters in school, it matters in college. It turns out to achieve these life long-term outcomes of well-being, job satisfaction, and learning, it's what you do in college, not where you go, that matters. So let's take a look at what engagement means. And I'd like you again, if you can remember what you listed on your criteria sheet, to go back to that sheet and look at some of these metrics. Extracurricular activities my child enjoys, availability of professional internships, project hands based on curricula, quality of teaching, research opportunities. We know that these are the critical factors that when it comes to being in college, make a difference, that our studies are showing. So having a mentor, having an opportunity to participate in an internships that helps you apply your learning, being active in extracurriculars, and it doesn't matter what it is. It could be the ultimate Frisbee travel team, being an RA, a resident advisor, being in a robotics club, right? Whatever that is. And then finally having professors who care or makes learning exciting. These are the criteria. And I think many of you listed many of these on your essentials when you were considering your child and what might be important for him or her while in university.
So what is fit? Let's talk about the big picture here. Fit is where your child will engage and thrive most in school. And that's the starting place for all conversations about where you want to be applying to school. Again, this is about your child's ranking elements, not yours. And there are many, many fits for every student. So to put it another way, there are over 4,500 accredited colleges in the US. There are not 12, there's not 20, but over 4,500 accredited colleges, including 3,100 four-year colleges. There are lots and lots of choices to find engagement and to find fit. So like, to put it another way, what is the top 10% of colleges in the US? There's 310 of them. And I'm assuming that you probably named 20, maybe 50 colleges. There's so many colleges out there for your child. To put it another way, we love giving this story. We asked Stanford admissions director, how many students apply to Stanford and how many fit the criteria? So over 30,000 students apply, high school students apply to Stanford each year. And take a guess how many of those 30,000 students perfectly fit the criteria of being at Stanford. 75%. So 75% of kids who apply to Stanford would get in and be totally happy there, and Stanford would be totally happy to have them. But we only accept 5%. And that's just because Stanford has a small class. And so what happens to those kids, the other 70% of kids who don't get into Stanford? They go elsewhere and they're happy as long as they're engaged. Another way we put it is we could get rid of that, our first class, and we could replicate it over and over and over again with kids. We would just be we would be just as happy with at Stanford, that those kids go to other schools and those kids succeed in life too, as long as they're engaged.
Yep, for sure. And I just want to point out too, they're building a class. So you cannot feel, your child will feel personally rejected. But when we think about Stanford, and any other college, they need representation from all states, right? From other countries, equal numbers of boys and girls, right? Tuba players, they need to field a football team. So all of these factors really go holistically into looking at building that class. And I lastly want to point out the professor mortality rate, right? There are so many professors coming into the field. There are not enough slots for them to go into these terms of highly selective schools. So where are they going? They're going all over the place. So just knowing that kids are going all over the place, that don't get into these top schools, to find, similar peer groups, and that there are fantastic professors across the country. Now,
Yeah, Margaret. Yeah, I just think about it, what you're talking about. We think that getting into Stanford means something about our kid or it means something about our family, and it doesn't. Because Stanford, one of our jokes internally is Stanford can't take 76 trombones. So if you're a trombone player, you may not get in, but you're going to go somewhere else and you're going to do great as long as you're engaged. So the good news, again, is there are so many colleges that are a good fit for your child. So we can focus on readiness and engagement and what will prepare them fully for any of those fit. So the real question is, regardless of where your kid goes to school, are they ready? And so when we look at these areas, and ask yourself, what are you doing to prepare your kid in all four of these areas? And what happens is we typically focus on academic skills. And that is the focus in high school. And I love those academic skills, particularly growth mindset. Having a growth mindset for the rest of your life is going to really prepare you for college and for your career. But that very narrow focus on academic skills obscures that there are so many other things that our kids need to be healthy adults. Social and emotional skills, how to manage conflict, work in teams, maintain positive relationships. Those are critical skills for the success that you mentioned at the beginning of the talk. Again, positive coping skills, how to avoid risky behaviors and learning from mistakes. I would suggest that those are actually more critical than the academic skills. I know that's sort of that's a little risky to say, but I think learning from mistakes is probably the #1 skill that your child needs to learn for the rest of their lives. And life skills, can your kid actually manage life without their parents? I teach personal finance. So one of the things that I always focus on is, does your child know how to manage money? Do they know how to make a budget? Do they know how to plan for retirement? I know so many adults that don't know how to plan for retirement or manage money. And because of that, the rest of their lives cannot be managed. So here's the secret. The pandemic and COVID and remote learning and all these things have really made it difficult to focus on academic skills. But if you look at these other 3 quadrants, these are the things that we're actually learning right now during COVID. There's so many things that we've lost, but the opportunity right now is to widen your gaze and focus on the things that your kids need for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, I mean, hire a tutor to take out the trash. That's what I say in my home, right? Like, you want to focus on some of these critical elements that will lead to more independence. Like, we have kids at Stanford who are calling their mom, right, when they don't get the classes they want. So you want to make sure that your kid is ready to go off and live independently as best as they can. And to do that, we really need to focus and parent to the full slate of readiness. Now, I want you to look at this quick cartoon. There will be plenty of time for playing after you get into college. It turns out this is exactly wrong. And we want to share with you the protective factors that we know in the research leads to higher achievement, less risky behavior, and overall better well-being. We call it PDF, and it's an acronym. It stands for playtime, downtime, and family time. And we want to protect it at all costs and make sure that it's embedded into our child's daily lives. So with PDF, we'll start with the P for play. We want to ensure there's enough time for play for younger kids, right? It's about pure play, and they're little scientists testing hypotheses. And then that tends to look different for our older kids and is often tied to social media or hanging out with friends, right? But we want to make sure there's play, there's creative time. We want to make sure the D in downtime is that they have time for transition, they have time to unwind, relax, and consider these essential questions that they're really top of mind for our teens. Who am I? Am I normal? And do I belong? These essential questions that they need time to reflect on. And then sleep. We hit sleep pretty hard at Challenge Success in terms of the importance of it. We know that depression and anxiety are bilaterally connected to sleep deprivation. And so to help your teens get enough sleep, for high school kids, that's between 8 and 10 hours a night. For our middle school kids, it's between 9 and 11 hours per night. And for our younger kids, it can be anywhere from 11 to 13 hours for our younger kids. Naps count. So make sure that you're helping your kids get enough sleep, getting those smartphones out of the bedroom, and really prioritizing that in terms of health. And then lastly is the F for family time. And that has been replicated in the research so many times, but it's you want to hit about 25 minutes of family time 5 times per week. Weekends count, and make sure that that's unplugged time. Maybe it's a family meal. In my home, sometimes it's a forced family evening march walk, but it's good to get everyone still connected and make sure no one's falling through the cracks. So that is PDF, and again, parenting to that full slate of readiness, including PDF.
And Margaret, I just wanted to make a plug again for that sleep. Our research shows that our kids in high school are getting about 6.75 hours of sleep a night, and they're supposed to be getting 9.25. And that's a 25% deficit night after night. And the way I think about it is we would never feed our kids 25% less, but somehow we let our kids sleep 25% less. And developmentally, that's just not very good.
Yeah, really important. And for you as parents to model that as well, that you need PDF in your lives and for the sleep as well. So here are some strategies for parents. This was a poster that was done by a local high school up here in Northern California. This is one of the posters. Yeah, I'm going to college, but don't ask me where, ask me why. This is a really difficult time for our seniors who are hearing back or still in the midst of applying. And probably the worst question you can ask them is, where did you apply, or where are you applying? Or even worse, where did you get in, right? We want to be careful and follow some of these strategies. So number one is really share with your child what you define as success as we started this talk, to share with them that you really are hoping to parent and focus on these intrinsic measures of kindness and well-being, and to parent to those. We want to support the full slate of readiness. The recording will have that document so you can kind of take a peek at those 4 quadrants and make sure that you're hitting those and making parenting to those. Protecting playtime, downtime, and family time. And really important to avoid saying just. He's just applying to community college, or he's just applying to XYZ school, or he's just going to take a gap year with all the uncertainty, which may be a very viable next step post-secondary, right? So we want to avoid just that word, right? Imagine how that might make that child feel. And really importantly, to reflect on your stake in where they go to school. Apparently, we're kind of the only country around the globe that wears our alumni colleges on our chests, right? In France, you don't see people wearing Sorbonne, right? So you want to reflect on your stake in where they go. They're going to college, not you, and to make sure that they are leading the process, that they are identifying those essential criteria as they look for future fit. And create college free zones. Make it maybe the weekly meeting you schedule with your child. In my home with my son, Jack, it's once a week. It's not a particular day, but we schedule a 1.5 hour block with an agenda and little boxes he can check off when we go through this process. The worst thing to do is pepper your kid with a bunch of questions. They're already stressed enough, so just protect that time, create those college free zones, and then talk about fit. Go back to those essential questions, characteristics in terms of college, location, finances are big. What a family can afford. Do you want a small, medium, or larger school? Does it have the major you're interested in? Is it okay if you don't have a declared major? There are fits for all kids, and so to do your research to find that. I know Sarah's going to go ahead and add to the chat if she hasn't already. We have a couple wonderful authors that we love, Paul Tuff, Frank Bruni, Bernard Brennan, and then finally Jeff Salingo, who have written great books to help you just with the process and finding fit.
So we're about to close soon, but one of the things Margaret and I want you to think about is we don't want you to know something different. We want you to do something different. So if you'd write in the chat, what's one thing you're committed to doing more deeply or doing differently because of this workshop? Just put in the chat. It's just going to be really helpful for you to think about what do you want to do differently now or do more of after this chat. And, you know, as you put that in the chat, we just want to remind you, like, you know, the path to success is not straight. It is a squiggly line for the vast majority of us. And our kids right now hear and believe, they truly believe that they have to be on that straight line. And that is so damaging for their psyches. And the more we can teach our kids that our life is a squiggly line. We're in a squiggly line right now this year. And the more that they can prepare for the squiggly line through the full slate readiness, the more prepared.
Yeah, we're
So
I was just going to comment on something. Go ahead, Douglas.
No, I was telling you to go.
I love it. A lot of focus and commitments are around PDF, family time, sleep. Make sure my daughter is leading the process, schedule weekly college time conversation. Ask my son to do more chores. Fantastic, from Danny. Be more focused on what he's looking for. Really wonderful. Once college apps are in, says Nicole, we'll turn to life skills, banking and laundry. Fantastic. We are really thrilled that you have shared your evening with us. We are going to hang on for some Q&A if you want to stay, but we wanted to share a little bit about our organization and stay engaged. We offer conferences, coaching, lots of different professional development for schools and parent education for communities. We have our surveys for students, parents, and school staff to learn more about the student, parent, and staff experience. Our research white papers are on our website and they're free. I know that Sarah, I think, has already added that to the chat. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our organization. And I'm going to invite Charlene back on and Sarah's back on. Great.
Well, thank you, Margaret and Douglas, for a great presentation. I think everybody has lots to think about now. As Denise Pope says, PDF is not a shareable document. It's really something that's important for kids and families. So please do take their advice into consideration. We love all the comments coming in from chat. All right, let's get started on some questions. Margaret and Douglas, this is a parent who asked, I didn't quite understand about the income differential for kids from underserved communities. Could you explain that? Finding the white paper.
Right. So that was the one difference we saw for kids who got into these highly selective schools, right? Remember Kruger and Dale, there were two sets of kids. There were really no changes in life outcomes from the kids who got in and went to those highly selective schools and the kids who got in and didn't go. It turns out it was the kid, not the college, except for one caveat. What were the kids who came from traditionally underserved populations? That, or first generation, that did show an increase in income for that population of students. Great question.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd also add that Raj Chetty, who's an amazing economist, he writes a lot about this. If you, Rajchetty, talks a lot about social mobility in underrepresented communities. So that's another person to look up.
So if I can, I'll just give it like a concrete example, a local example for the Bay Area. Let's say your kid gets into Berkeley and gets into San Jose State. And for whatever, there are multiple reasons that a kid may not go to the more selective or more prestigious school. Either like they get a full scholarship or they want to stay closer to home or whatever the thing is. When you track kids that got into Berkeley but went to San Jose State, they had the same income as if they had gone to Berkeley.
Okay, so here's a parent who commented, I want to know what you think about this. Certain industries value an applicant from prestigious colleges, i.e. finance, investment banking. What do you have to say to that, Douglas and Margaret?
Yeah, my daughter went to a less selective school, so to speak, and she just interviewed for a large consulting firm, and she went to the interview, and guess what it said in the Zoom room? Non-target school. That was the interview kind of lead in. So she was faced with that reality that she was at a non-target school. She ultimately got the job, but we want to recognize that there is that sense. I think, Sarah, too, we could add to the graduate school tends to be more important when we're looking at that.
Yep. And that's on that list of like, what's important to you. So if you know that sort of that's important in your criteria, there are some differences between schools or among schools.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just add really quickly, like, yeah, I think it's true. And I think it's changing. Industries are changing very, very quickly. I would also add, like, if your kid goes to a different school, they may not become an investment banker, but all the research shows that if they stay engaged and they study, they're still going to get the same income and they're going to have the same life job satisfaction.
We also have heard from Google and IDEO and some giant hiring agents down in the Silicon Valley that their hiring has changed throughout the years. They say, look, we can teach business skills, but we can't teach passion. We can't teach integrity. We can't teach some of these full readiness slate characteristics.
Communication, critical thinking,
collaboration, right? All of those factors, we see hiring changing for sure.
Really good point, Margaret. That's true. My daughter works for IDEO and they are a very open engagement place, but they're looking for character skills and engagement and how people relate. It's really hard on them during the pandemic because they miss so much being together in person.
totally.
Okay. Here's a question that I know lots of parents have on their minds. Everyone assumes that it's the parents pushing for an elite college, but I feel like it's my daughter's friends that are really doing that. Do you have any advice for her? I'm worried that she kind of wants to win over the other girls. When it's peer pressure rather than parent pressure, what should we do?
Right. We've been pushing this for a long time to lower the peer pressure. We know it's out there. We know that there are high schools publishing the matriculation college lists, right? We have many high schools that have moved to, instead of listing those, to say, give me 5 words, student, about your future plans. I'm moving to Boston, right? Sometimes they list the college, but we know there's extreme peer pressure. But I think that it's important to have that child advocate for him or herself around creating some boundaries, just as we do with parents and kids around the college discussion, and to really think about fit, to go back to the essential characteristics and have them reflect on what is important to them, to try to be fueled by the research.
I'm
sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
I would also say that sometimes parents can feed into the frenzy around posting things on social media about my kid got into so-and-so. And so also like keeping in mind, like, this is not your, sort of accomplishment, and not feeding into that frenzy, and restraining and keeping some of those boundaries can help.
Yeah, and I would say, like, absolutely real, right? Kids are facing peer pressure and competition. It's a status game, right? And I just think this is both, this is the problem, and this is actually the opportunity. This is the opportunity to have a conversation about your kid. What do you want? Not how are you trying to please your peers, but what is the thing that you want most? And that's the opportunity. That's the conversation you can have now.
And as Douglas mentioned, there are thousands of schools in this country. You may not have heard of them, but as Maria Furtado says, they also haven't heard of you. So it's refreshing to remember that. And also that the percentage is that 75% of kids nationwide get into their first choice school. So parents, don't feel that your kid's not going to be happy at some of the schools that they may not have heard about before. So fit really matters, just like you've been hearing tonight. Okay, this question again, probably something that you hear a lot. Why do the CSUs only go by grades and they don't consider essays or activities like the UCs do and the Common App? CSUs like San Jose State, Cal State Hayward.
Yeah, it's a very different application. First of all, they're funneling a lot of applications for their schools, right? It's affordable. kids in California want to go there. You've got to, even now in terms of our uncertainty with the economics and families and jobs, et cetera, folks are, so it is true, they're using those metrics. And I don't have a rationale to share with you. A CSU representative for sure could, but I do know that they go by the grades and they don't have an essay attributed to that. And the programs are impacted. Many of those programs are impacted. So they're getting tougher to get into, for sure.
Yes, yes, so true. All right, here's a change of pace question. We can't afford to send our teen to the colleges they say they want to attend. How do we help them take a more realistic view?
Yeah.
Amazing question.
Well,
yeah, I'll start it. You know, I think, you know, our kids have their hearts set on a school. And it's sometimes a mystery why. I think it's just a really good place to have a conversation. What does the school represent in their hearts? And starting there, like, why is this important to you to go to this school? Begins a conversation. And I think that conversation is super important.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
I just also add, early on in the whole process of college and talk about expenses, be really clear with the family and the affordability piece so that it's in front of that conversation before they get too far down the line in terms of falling in for their dream school, which may be exorbitant.
Yes, and parents, there's a good video on our video library called Finding the Right School at the Right Price from Lynn O'Shaughnessy. She's a higher ed financial journalist. Do check that out. She makes really good points about planning for college and how, even though the kids, especially in California, want to go to schools on the coasts, there's a lot of really wonderful schools in the middle of this country to consider. And a lot of them have merit aid and need-based aid, so that helps families too.
And I would say, Charlene, that part of the full slate of readiness is understanding trade-offs.
Yeah.
And trade-offs exist as we all know, throughout our entire lives. And so that's a good time to start if you haven't already talked about trade-offs.
That's right. And remember, you're hearing from everyone here tonight. Have these conversations with your kids. Be straightforward. It's really important.
You know, so when I taught high school, like, I just recognized it was so important where kids went to school. Like, it was just the most important things in their life. And that's because the atmosphere of where they're at, right? That's how they're being judged by others. And it's just so funny. I just realized until 7 o'clock today, I did not know where Margaret and Sarah went to college, right? Like, when you're an adult, no one asks you where you went to college. And so the thing that matters most as a teenager suddenly becomes absolutely unimportant as an adult. And I just want to, like, if we can give our kids a little perspective, it's not where you go, but who you're going to be while you're there. It's the engagement, it's the lifelong learning, it's the ability to, like, you know, learn from our mistakes and fail and go through that twisty line. That's what brings Sarah, Margaret, and I here.
Absolutely. And parents, I have 2 young adults, and it turns out that about 4 years after they graduate from college, parents even stop asking each other where their kids went to college. So there's that. Okay, let's see. This is another question I think is a great one. My son is eager to go to college, but his criteria seems almost entirely based on social aspects like athletic teams and partying. How do I make it clear that we're not sending him to summer camp?
Yes. Well, I want to be, you know, kids don't really always have a sense of what they are going to do in college. It is really the vast unknown. They may not have declared a major. They may not have decided what they want to study in college, but a large part of college is this developmental piece. It is the social piece. It is living independently. It's facing all those quadrants at once by yourself and living independently. So as Sarah Miles likes to say, it is a developmental imperative. And that is what they will be facing in those college years. And that is okay.
That is really great.
Caveat to be sure that maybe it's a smaller college for this son.
But they're supposed to worry about the social, and, like, it's their job right now.
Well, we have come to the end of our hour. We still have great questions coming in. I wish we could do them all. So thank you for the questions. But I want to let each of you have a last word. So Margaret, Douglas, Sarah, what is the one thing you yourself most want parents to come away with tonight?
Well, the most important thing I hope you got out of today's talk is that it's what you do in college, not where you go, that really matters. I want you to really think about those foundational characteristics that you defined earlier in the talk, and keep the big picture in mind, grounded in that value, and let that guide the process.
Great advice. Thank you, Margaret. Sarah, what are you thinking?
This is something I say to myself often. I have teenagers. Just see the child in front of you. That's all.
It's really true. Not your sister's kid, not the one down the street.
Yeah.
Thank you. Beautiful advice. Douglas, gonna let you have the last word.
Yeah, Carl Jung said that the greatest burden on any kid is the unrealized dreams of their parents. And so the projections we have on our kids and what we want from them is a burden on them and their own childhood, right? Like, adolescence is its own developmental stage. Let's let them have it without like making it about the thing that they're supposed to do afterwards.
I think that is all lovely advice. So again, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Challenge Success. Thank you to all of our attendees for coming with us tonight. This event will be video recorded, is being video recorded, and will be available on our video library shortly. We're proud to work with the students from the Boys and Girls Club of the Peninsula to produce our videos. Takes a few days, but it's worth it. Again, thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you, Margaret, Douglas, and Sarah, for all your great advice. Hope to see you soon. Take care, everybody, and stay well. Bye-bye.